Good morning and welcome to part 3 of Discover Drawing. My name is Senya Brendan and I'm coming to you from the island of Arran. Short hair today. If you're watching this sometime in the future, just look up what was happening in April 2020 and you'll understand about the home haircut. Anyway, big thanks to my husband Dominic, who's done, I think, a pretty fantastic job, all things considered. Not an easy cut to do, but he's done. Little bit G.I. Jane, but there we go. So today we're going to be having a look at doing some shading. And if you managed to watch my very short video, which I know didn't get out to everybody, about preparing for today's lesson, then we were looking at preparing some graphite ground. So I'll just quickly go over that again in case you missed it. So basically, if you've got a graphite block, which looks something like this, or if you haven't, you can use your softest pencil that you've got. But this, the beauty of a graphite block look is it lets you create a ground really easily. A ground is just a short word really for a background. And then you can either use your fingers or a piece of tissue, and you just work the graphite into the paper like this. Okay, so that gives you a middle tone. What we're going to look at today is taking some of the shapes that we drew last week, and we're going to turn them now into more three-dimensional looking objects. So the first one we're going to do is to have a look at, sorry, I meant to say, if you didn't have a graphite block, just a soft pencil, that's a 6B, just takes a little bit longer. And then you can either rub it with your finger or with a tissue. A 2B will also work on its side. Remember that overhand grip that we looked at? That's really good for this sort of shading of large areas. And again, then you can take your tissue. Okay, so it'd be a good idea if you haven't already got some grounds, if you want to just pause the video and maybe prepare a few just now, that would be quite useful. So looking at the grounds then, let's remember what we did for our cylinder. So we looked at holding the pencil in slightly more sketchily ways, and we looked at an ellipse, which is like a kind of a squash circle. Okay, so that's me used that underhand grip to get the general feel of it, and then I'm just going to, I'll turn it to me just so I can try and get it quite even. But I'm now using a slightly different pencil hold just to pick out my favourite lines to get it as even as I can manage. Okay, so there you go. And if you remember, there are no sharp points here or here. Okay, it's not like an eye shape. It's got that lovely curve, and it's looking at a circle at different angles, if you remember. Then I'm going to pull down the vertical lines to make a cylinder, and then I'm going to do, remember, whatever that smile shape is there, do exactly a matching smile at the bottom. No straight lines at the bottom, even though our logical left brain is telling us the bottom of a tin is flat. What you actually see, as opposed to what you think you see, is actually a curve. And again, our logical left brain tells us that this tin is sitting on top of the table, and therefore that's another reason we end up with the flat bottom. But if you remember, I showed you last week, just bring your table up a little bit behind your object like that. I'll just do those lines a bit darker for you so you can see them. Okay, so bring it up a little bit at the back like that, and that allows you, instead of it being perched on top of the table, this now gives us somewhere to put a shadow. The next thing you have to remember is that everything solid on this earth casts a shadow. It blocks the light, so you have to be very clear if you're wanting to make your work look three-dimensional that you know where your light is coming from. If you're drawing from life, then you'll be able to look at where the object is and where the light falls on it. If you're drawing from your imagination, like I am with this one, just make a decision yourself. Sometimes it's quite helpful, if you want to put a little arrow, and then, you know, you can either put like a little light bulb. Can't draw a light bulb. Okay, or you can just write the word L or write the word light in here. Okay, so we've got our light coming this way onto our tin, which means that we're going to have light where it hits us on this side, and this side is going to be darker. Now, because we've already got our middle tone, okay, what we can do now is we can take a rubber and we can rub out some of the highlights. So if our light is coming this way, then straight away we can rub out. And also don't forget your line as well. Your line might be slightly lighter there. So I'm going to just rub out. Okay, and the further away we get, I'm just using the side of the rubber now, so I'm half rubbing to blend it in. Okay, so I've gone from really light on this side, okay, really light on this side, okay, and then the light that's side that's furthest away, I'm going to just use the side of my pencil here to darken. And the other thing is I could even just start by working on the line, look. See the difference even just by darkening that line there, and the side with the light coming on it, I've lightened the line. As soon as you put a dark line in there, it just flattens your image. I'll show you. So if I put in a really dark line on that side as well, then it just is the same as this side. So I'm going to just rub that out again, and it's going to leave a little faint reminder of itself. And I'm just going to take my finger to smudge back up to the edge of that line there, okay? And I've gone a little bit over there, so I'll just rub that back out. So going back to this side away from the light. Now again, remember your contours. It's quite tempting just to go up and down or side to side, but if you put a slight curve, even on your shading, every mark you make, remember, informs the viewer as to what's happening. So try and keep just that little bit of a curve. I'm going to just go over vertically, just it's a bit like cross hatching if you like. So I'm just going to really darken this area right down. Use the point of the pencil. Okay, and then crisscrossing maybe this way, maybe that way, and then get those final curve lines. And then if you want to use either a tissue or your finger, but again, think of those curves. You see how my finger's curving round the contours of the object even at this stage. You can rub it one way, cross over and rub it the other. You could use your dirty fingers there to put some more shadow in the top. Okay, then we might go back, and I'm thinking this line here is maybe a bit dark because it's in the lighter area here. So I might take my 2B pencil just to do a slightly fainter line on that side. And this side that's in the shadow, I'm going to do, and actually if you wanted to make it into a vase rather than a tin, then you know you can always put some more shading in the inside as well. Okay, but this bit here is going to definitely come forward, and I think we could probably go even darker. And you can just keep building up the layers until you're quite happy about the general shape, and you can rub bits out, add bits in, until you're getting that solid shape there. I'm just going to create a bit of a background here. I'm just filling in the background here because this looked a little bit okay. So there we go. So now we have a more solid looking object with your light coming down from here, hitting the side of it, which is light, and then you've added the darker shadows on the side furthest away from where the light is falling. And now that looks fine, but the other thing you've got to remember is that solid things cast a shadow, so we need to deal with the shadow. Now obviously if the light's coming this direction, the shadow is going to be here, and because we've raised up this table level at the back, we've actually got somewhere to put the sort of shadow. Okay, so I'm trying to do this sort of, it'll be somewhere. If the light's coming this way, it'll probably be sort of somewhere around there, like that. So I've just drawn in the shadow. So I'm going to first of all just shade in the shadow area. So shaded in the shadow area there. Okay, so now it's casting a shadow on the table. But one thing that you must remember about a shadow is shadows don't have hard edges, so don't draw in a line like that. That's not going to work very well for your shadow. Okay, so let's get rid of that. And this is where the putty rubber can be quite useful. So that was my Derwent putty rubber there. Okay, it's quite squidgy and soft. So the beauty of this soft rubber is it can lift. I'm going to go back to my sharp cornered one just to get rid of that pencil line. Okay, and then I'm just going to re-smudge. So shadows don't have hard edges. Okay, the other tip I can give you for shadows, again, you see you can lift off slightly different. It's a bit softer, this rubber. Okay. Another tip for shadows is the shadow's always going to be darkest as it gets closer to the object. Okay, so this bit here, okay, so the closer the shadow is to the object, the darker it is. So near your object, it will be really, really dark, and then you've got to try and get slightly lighter and lighter as you get further away. And then you can use your putty rubber to lift off any bits that you don't want, like that. And I can lift off bits on this side as well that I don't want on this side here. Okay, so it's all about your lights and your darks and using the pencil to just shade. So if you think about it, light side is lightest. You've already got your middle tone from your ground, and then put in your darkest darks the furthest away from the light. And then your shadow is underneath it. And the tip for shadows is that shadows get darker the closer you are to your object. I think that's my dog's just come back in. Okay, so hello, do you want to come and say hello, darling? This is my husband Dominic. He's responsible for my haircut, which we've just had a look at.
Hi everybody, sorry.
That's a cylinder. So I'd like you to practice drawing a few cylinders, shading them in and trying to get those shadows until you're happy with it. Another thing that you could try is a sphere. So if you get yourself something round, okay, you can see it there, and start with a perfect circle for a sphere. It's much more believable if you've got a proper circle shape. So by all means, draw around it. Why don't we have the light coming from the other side this time? So I'm going to do an arrow to show you where my light is coming from. Then I'm going to get my rubber. I'm just going to add a little bit more charcoal, graphite, to make that a bit darker. Okay, now what I'm going to do is get my rubber, and I'm going to rub out. First of all, don't forget to lighten the lines as well as the areas. Okay, so just rubbing out the side where the light's hitting, here, and then darkening the side furthest away. And you can start to build up, and again, look how I'm taking the pencil round the contour line of the sphere. I'm not going backwards and forwards in a straight line. That would flatten your image. So again, always be conscious of those contour lines. What shape is it you're trying to create? Every line informs what you do. Okay, so you can start to see the beginnings of some shading there. And again, if you want to put your table raised up behind, it's quite nice if you rub out above the table or below the table, and then that gives you a very definite surface. So if I clean up all of this with the rubber, okay, and then if I want to, I could take my soft pencil and I could make my table slightly darker than the wall behind it. Okay, so similar idea to your cylinder, okay, where it's touching the table. When one thing touches something else, it always creates a darker shadow. If you take your two hands, mine are filthy, if you take your two hands and you put them together, can you see the really dark line that you create? Okay, spread your fingers out, no dark lines on the edges of your fingers, but close them and you can see these really dark lines. Dark lines disappear, close them, dark lines are there. So if you think about the idea, when one thing touches something else, it creates a darker line. Okay, so where this sphere is touching the table, even if I just slightly darken as it touches the table, can you see the difference that that makes there, where it's touching the table? And again, light coming this way, so this time our shadow is going to be on this side. Okay, think about how you're holding your pencil, not a handwriting grip. We want soft sketching that we can rub out here. So there, remember, no hard lines around the outside of your shadow. So I'm just going to do a rough shadow with the side of my 6B pencil. Okay. And shadows get paler the further that they are away. And they are darker the closer they are to the object. Okay, so again, starting really dark, okay, and there we go. Okay, so again, we're creating, and again, you might want to rub out some more light. Okay, and you can spend quite a long time building up the layers on your sphere. Okay, if you want to look up on Google, if you look up on the internet, there's lots of tutorials on how to draw a sphere, how to draw a cylinder, and how to draw a cube. It might be worth you just investigating that, maybe trying a couple of tutorials that you can follow step by step. And you can also learn some of the terms. You know, we've got highlights where the light hits. Okay, so highlights here, we've got shadows here. There's also a thing called a core shadow, which is the darkest part. And also, for those of you that want to get a bit more technical, sometimes you get reflected light from the table or the surface that your object's sitting on, and that creates a little bit of sort of medium light area down below. Okay, so there's a few more technicalities to that, but basically you're looking for identify where your light is coming from, and it's going to be lighter on that side and darker on the side that's opposite to where the light is hitting. Remember to just lighten your lines. Okay, so I could do with actually lightening that line just there a little bit. Okay, so remember to lighten your lines as well as your shading. So what I would like you to do is, for Wednesday, for the next lesson, I'd like you to practice doing some spheres, some cylinders, and if you can find time to do a cube as well, and just look at shading the different sides of that. Once you've practiced that, then on Wednesday we're going to go on with drawing actual objects. I think it's time we started a proper drawing using some of the skills that we have learned. So if you could do one last thing for me today, ready for next week, I want you to draw me a quick shoe. I'm quite conscious that I normally would start with something like a leaf or flowers, but with many of you being on lockdown inside, then I think it would make sense to use something that we can easily find. So what I'm wanting you to do on Wednesday is we're going to look at drawing a pair of shoes. Now, I would like you to pick the most complicated shoes that you can find. Trust me when I say the more complex the shoes are, the easier this exercise will be. But just to start you off, I want you all to draw me a quick shoe just now. So you can draw it along with me, okay? I'm just going to, this is literally the amount of time I want you to spend on it. So you start drawing a shoe on a scrap of paper, it doesn't matter where you draw it. You draw a shoe, I'll draw a shoe. Okay, so you should be drawing your shoe now. I'm not going to show you what I'm drawing. I'll show you on Wednesday. Okay, so drawing a shoe. Don't overthink this. Okay, I'll explain what this is all about on Wednesday. But to help you with your drawing, we're going to look at a little bit of science of drawing on Wednesday as well. Okay, so that's me finished. I've drawn my shoe. I didn't look at a shoe to draw it, and I don't want you to either. If somebody asked you, could you just quickly draw me a shoe, what would you do? Somebody asked me to quickly draw a shoe. I'll show you on Wednesday what I did. And then we're going to have a look at the difference between that and what we can actually do if we apply some of the techniques we've learned to date. So I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday. Happy drawing, everybody, and goodbye from Discover Drawing.